Hi, and thank you for joining me on another episode of the Tech Exec Podcast, where I'll help you create teams worth leading because life's too short to lead a mediocre team. As always, I'm your host, Aviv Ben-Yosef, Tech Executive Coach and Consultant, and our subject today is dishonesty. This is about something that, unfortunately, I still see from time to time, and I want to start with an example. If you were to call up a technician to come over to you, and at the end of the appointment, you realize that the technician was actually hiding things from you, like not telling you that they knew that whatever work they were doing was not going to work and only went through it so that you would think that, okay, this was a really tough fix. Or if you'd found out that they initially only gave you options knowing that even the minimal option was more expensive than it ought to be, that sort of stuff. Even if at the end of the day, they did the work well, and even if, had you known everything in advance, you would have still chosen everything the same, you would feel like, okay, someone put a number on me, right? Someone here was not honest. And while that clearly, I'm guessing, sets off some alarms, you might be doing something not that far from it in your day-to-day work, and I think that's a real issue. How are we dishonest as leaders? Well, it might be something like when you're giving estimates, or when you're telling about how long something would take, you're buffering it without telling anyone that you're buffering it. When they assume that you're giving them like the actual estimate, but you know that you've already baked into it like 2 weeks just in case. This is dishonest. You should be able to say this is when you're asked for the actual estimate without the actual buffers, you should be able to say that, especially when we end up buffering things on top of things, when your CEO doesn't know that you're buffering and they're going to then add a buffer for when they will count on things to be ready to do the PR. You're now getting buffers upon buffers, making everything take much longer without even all of you realizing that you're doing that. Or another example is, I once heard from a VP of engineering who told me that he thought he would have to cut some people. So he already had like the list with the 2-3 names that he would cut given the impending budget cuts. Like he knew, okay, this was probably going to happen. He heard from the CEO, he might need to do it. But then at the last minute, the CEO said, okay, I don't think that, the cut is not a must. So if you don't think we need to do it, we won't do that. And the VP of engineering was, okay, awesome. And I asked, hey, those names that you had there, like, how did you choose them? Are they just, the people that you think you can live without? Or are they really people who are not doing well, etc.? And he said, yeah, actually, it wasn't hard for me to come up with those 2-3 names because those are people who are underperforming. And therefore, if I had to cut them, that would not be really an issue. And I said, okay, and you're not doing anything about it right now? And he said, no, I want to save it for if we're actually going to have to do the budget cuts in a month or two. And this is dishonest because, again, you might be saying, okay, no, the CEO told me I don't have to cut anyone. And therefore, I'm not gonna, and I'm going to save it for when I have to. But this is dishonesty as in we're not telling people exactly what's happening. Or another example is when you're too worried about how things might be seen or what feedback you're going to be getting or how you're going to make yourself seem like you did good in this version, in this quarter, that you're thinking more about that and how to convey that message than about doing the actual work. Those are all dishonest things that we do when we are not measuring ourselves by the actual thing that's in alignment with the company's best needs. And I always tell my clients, can we always 100% of the time be in alignment with the company? Of course not. Maybe you realize that the right thing to do is to dump a project that you really like or work really hard for the next couple of weeks and it coincides with something personal. It cannot always be like that. And yet, the vast majority of the time, it should be in alignment and it should be clear to everyone when that's not the case. When you're saying, yes, I know I personally would rather us do this, but I think this and that. Or I think this and that, but you should be aware of the fact that, I also have this bias. When we're being dishonest, it's not just that we're doing something that's unethical and that I think can be wrong morally and depending on the situation, maybe even legally. But even before we get to whether anyone else is getting harmed, I think that you are. I think that when we do it, we are actually cutting ourselves a break. We are being cowards, not able to just face the real situation, tell the other person exactly what's really happening and why we need to do things differently, or why we think that something isn't going to be working out, or why we don't agree about something, or why we need more time. When we do everything like that, we are harming ourselves first. We are crippling our ability to be true. We are training our own brains to know that when we say something, it might not be the right thing to do, and eventually you're going to stop believing yourself. This is not woo-woo. This is actually science-based stuff that has been researched. When we are used to saying things and not actually standing by them, not actually believing in them, at the end of the day, our brains pick up on that and stop believing whatever we tell ourselves as well. This is harmful, and this can really harm your career long-term. Am I saying that, okay, you should just be blurting out whatever happens, whatever you think, without any thought of the consequences? Of course not. You should be wielding communication like a tool, like a skill that you're actively working on improving, that you do this something by understanding how you're going to be doing it well and what you have in mind, what you want to achieve, how you expect the other person to react, how you want to frame it. All that makes sense, but there's a huge difference between framing the message, thinking about it, learning how to convey it in a way that will be received well, as opposed to just being plain dishonest. And I think this is the huge difference here. And I think even more than that, that when we accept the fact that we have to be real, we have to say exactly what actually is happening, we as leaders move up. We have this upgrade in our ability to communicate, to work effectively with our peers and with our boss. So you, right now, what I'm asking you to do is to consider where are you being dishonest and start laying out a path about how you can start saying what actually is happening, what you're actually thinking, what you actually believe is going to happen, etc. If you have tough time doing that, get some help. My email's in the show notes, but find something that will help you get there, because don't be dishonest with others. It only leads you to eventually be dishonest with yourself. That's it for this week. Thank you for joining me. As always, do check out my newsletter. It's the best newsletter online for tech execs. The link is in the show notes, and I'll see you here next week. Ciao.